You won't believe what unfolded inside this courtroom. A powerful judge once feared and untouchable humiliated a seasoned attorney on stage, only to have the tables turn dramatically moments later, leaving him in handcuffs. What led to this stunning reversal will leave you speechless. Before we continue the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you enjoy powerful real-life stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we've got another special story you won't want to miss. Now, let's dive in. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett was no stranger to high-pressure battles. Before becoming a member of Congress, she had spent years fighting for justice in the courtroom, as a criminal defense attorney for those who couldn't afford a voice, and later as a fierce advocate in politics. But nothing had prepared her for what she was about to face that day. The courtroom she entered that morning belonged to Judge Howard Gates, a man infamous for his sharp tongue, erratic rulings, and veiled bias. The case she brought was not just another file, it was a powder keg, a high-profile corruption scandal involving a wealthy real estate developer with deep ties to powerful political circles. The accusations were damning, alleging that state funds were siphoned off into private ventures. Jasmine had been appointed special prosecutor to bring the truth to light. Yet, even before she could utter a word, the atmosphere turned hostile. Judge Gates barely acknowledged her as she approached the prosecution table. He thumbed through a file slowly, deliberately letting silence spread, a silence so heavy it seemed to swallow every whispered murmur in the room. When he finally spoke, his words dripped with disdain. "Miss Crockett, I trust you've brought something worthwhile, or shall we skip to the part where you waste my time with your theatrics?" He snapped. A few chuckles came from the defense team, but Jasmine, unshaken, stood tall. "Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself. This case involves the misuse of taxpayer money, and my duty is to present the facts clearly and accurately," she stated in a calm, measured tone. Judge Gates leaned back, feigning boredom. "Taxpayer money, huh? That's never been the basis for baseless accusations before, right?" he challenged. Jasmine's jaw tightened, yet she kept her tone level. "With all due respect, Your Honor, charges of corruption and fraud are not baseless when the evidence is overwhelming." Their eyes met, his cold and calculated, hers steady and unwavering. But before she could continue, he cut her off again. "Miss Crockett, spare me the lectures. Get to the point. I don't have time to indulge your progressive fantasies," he snapped. A few murmurs stirred in the gallery, as everyone felt something was off. This was no ordinary stern ruling, it felt personal. Unperturbed, Jasmine picked up a folder and opened it. "Your Honor, I'd like to direct the court's attention to Exhibit A," she announced. "These financial records clearly show discrepancies in the developer's project funding, evidence you seem to dismiss by burying it in paperwork." Judge Gates snapped back. "Do you always bury people in paperwork, Miss Crockett, or is this just your way of compensating for a lack of real arguments?" The room tensed, and even the defense attorney smirked. But Jasmine did not flinch. She simply paused, placed the folder down, and clasped her hands. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "if you prefer to keep this personal, I'm willing to request a recess to address any professional concerns. But I must remind you that my right to display my religious symbol, the cross on my lapel, is fully protected by the First Amendment." The judge's eyes narrowed as his fingers laced together, bracing for her next words. "You're finding me for wearing that cross, claiming it violates courtroom neutrality. Tell me, on what legal precedent are you basing that?" he demanded. A heavy silence fell over the courtroom. The court reporter's fingers hovered over her keyboard, even the bailiff shifted uncomfortably. Jasmine tapped the paper in front of her. "Under Tinker v. Des Moines, 1969, and West Virginia State Board of Education v. Barnett, 1943, individuals do not shed their constitutional rights when they enter a government institution. My cross is a protected expression of faith." Judge Gates scoffed. "You're an attorney, not a law professor," he retorted sharply. Jasmine smiled coolly. "Then let me remind you, this courtroom operates under my duty to uphold the Constitution, not my personal beliefs. And if you enforce unwritten rules based on personal bias, then you're not upholding neutrality at all." The tension in the room grew, and murmurs turned into whispers as the debate shifted. A well-known legal commentator later noted that the clash between Jasmine and Judge Gates was less about a fine for wearing a cross and more about challenging the very limits of judicial authority. Just as the room seemed to hold its breath in anticipation, Jasmine reached into her folder and presented another set of documents. This time, financial records from the corruption case against the real estate developer. "Exhibit B," she announced, "shows that on multiple occasions, funds were misappropriated, evidence that undermines the integrity of our public institutions." Before Judge Gates could respond, he interjected, "This courtroom is not the place for your personal crusade, Miss Crockett. We have other business to attend to." But Jasmine pressed on, her voice steady. "Then let the record show that if I must stand here as a symbol of truth, I will not be silenced by your selective enforcement." At that moment, the air in the courtroom shifted palpably. The jurors, the reporters, even the spectators began to sense that this trial was transcending the boundaries of a mere corporate dispute. It had become a referendum on accountability, integrity, and the balance between personal expression and judicial discretion. As the hearing wore on, additional witnesses testified about the corruption in the developers' dealings, witnesses whose testimonies painted a vivid picture of unethical behavior. Yet every time Judge Gates attempted to dismiss key evidence, Jasmine's calm rebuttals reminded everyone that justice is not achieved by stifling dissent but by airing the truth. Then came a dramatic twist that left the courtroom reeling. With deliberate calm, Jasmine produced a small sealed envelope from her folder and handed it to the court clerk. The envelope contained official records verifying her identity and her right to represent the people with unyielding honesty. For a moment, Judge Gates' stern demeanor faltered as he flipped through the documents, his face registering shock and disbelief. "Miss Crockett, you have left me no choice," he muttered, before attempting to regain his composure. "I hereby fine you for contempt of court." The gavel's echo resounded through the chamber. Jasmine's response was measured and cool. "Your Honor, I accept this fine as a temporary measure. However, I will be filing an appeal on the grounds that my actions were entirely within my constitutional rights. My cross, my words, and my evidence speak not of contempt but of accountability." The room erupted in hushed murmurs, some in shock, others in admiration. Outside, news outlets picked up the story with headlines like "Judge fines Pam Bondi for wearing a cross, then uncovers her legal brilliance," though the story soon became known as the courtroom crescendo. The clip went viral, sparking debates across the nation about judicial overreach, the sanctity of personal expression, and the urgent need for reform in how courts handle constitutional rights. In the days that followed, as public discourse shifted from partisan squabbles to broader calls for transparency and accountability, Jasmine Crockett's defiant stand became a rallying cry. Legal experts argued that if a courtroom could be forced to acknowledge the protections of the First Amendment, then no one, not even a powerful judge, could suppress the truth. Back at her office, Jasmine reviewed the deluge of emails and messages of support from across the political spectrum. A note from a 16-year-old music student in Arizona read, "Watching you speak up made me brave enough to pick up my guitar again." Her heart warmed at the thought that her stand had inspired someone to reclaim their own voice. Later, at a closed-door session with bipartisan lawmakers, a motion was tabled to review the handling of personal expression in federal courtrooms. The proposal, soon dubbed the Crockett Accountability Act, aimed to ensure that judges could not impose fines or sanctions for the lawful expression of personal beliefs. The motion received robust support, and in a historic vote, it was passed with overwhelming bipartisan backing. On the day the act was signed into law, a quiet ceremony attended by only a handful of officials, the significance of Jasmine's courtroom battle was clear. It was not just a personal victory, it was a transformative moment that redefined how America would protect its constitutional rights in the face of unchecked judicial power. As the courthouse doors finally closed behind the departing figures that day, the nation was left to reflect on a profound truth. Real change begins when you have the courage to stand by your convictions, even when the odds are stacked against you. Jasmine Crockett's calm defiance had not only humbled a once untouchable judge but had sparked a movement that promised to reshape the balance between power and accountability for generations to come. Subscribe for more stories that challenge the boundaries of law, ethics, and personal conviction. O3 Mini High.